When you have your girls, you're never alone. You get together for coffee, maybe to work out, or just to laugh. We created Hey Girl just for you. Can't wait for you to join us.
Hey everybody, welcome to Hey Girl. I'm your girl Kim with an E, and this is episode 85. If you're joining us for the first time, I want to let you know that Hey Girl is a safe space where you can share your experiences and be affirmed. Let's face it, life can be complex and sometimes overwhelming. That's why we believe in the power of conversation, because knowing you're not alone is what will help you get through. And I'm not alone today because you are here. Welcome. Come on in. Say hello in the comments and let me know that you are here. I hope everyone has had a fantastic week. I know for those of us in the Huntsville area, we woke up this morning to a lot of rain and thunder, but thankfully we didn't get blown away. I know there were some places nearby that did suffer some damage. Definitely want to lift them up in prayer, but we thank God that you are here and that the Lord spared you to see another day. So come on in, as I said, be sure to share today's live. We're going to have a great show, very important conversation today. As you know, all throughout the month of December, we are focusing on marriage. And you may want to check out our previous marriage episodes. We actually do a marriage themed episode each year. And last year, around the same time, I believe it was in the fall of 2020, that we had some couples on to talk about marriage. And you may want to go back and look at some of those episodes because we've had some really important conversations in the past. And we want to continue that conversation this month with the couples that we will have on in December. Now, last week, I kicked off this conversation about marriage with a conversation particularly for women. So, of course, the show is called Hey Girl. And so all you ladies out there who have significant others, who have husbands, I feel like the conversation last week was really for you and for us to think about the men that we are in relationship with. And you may remember that I talked about Shaunti Feldhahn's book. It's called For Women Only. And what's really powerful about that book is that she is talking to us ladies about what goes on in the minds of men. I'm sure those of you who are in relationship know that our minds just work very differently from our husbands, right? We just see things differently. And sometimes that can create a lot of tension and conflict. And I feel like what Feldhahn does in her book is really helps us to get a different perspective or a better understanding, really, of what our men may be thinking. And once we know better, we can then do better. And so if you want to go back and look at last week's episode, I challenged each of you to pay more attention to what's going on with the men in your life and maybe to think differently about the way they act, instead of judging it negatively or harshly, to see it in a different light. I want to just really quickly run through a few of the points that I made that I think we should all really think about. First of all, she talked about the fact that men need respect. And I think we kind of assume that about men. Respect is really big for them. But what she brought out is that men need respect in the same way that women need love. And so she talked a lot about what respect looks like to men, and it may be something that we take for granted as women because of the way we receive love. She also talked about the fact that men are actually insecure, and that was one that I mentioned surprises me because I would never think about the men in my life as in any way being insecure. My husband and other men that I know come off very masculine and very strong and very confident, but she talked about how they actually often are very insecure. And the women in their lives, those who are closest to their heart, have the power to do great damage to them, to their feelings, to their heart, to their ego, which is quite fragile without even realizing it. She also talked about the fact that men need to be providers. They are providers, like they are wired to provide. And it's that deep need that is really their identity, at the core of their identity, that is sometimes not appreciated by the women in their lives, who may not see their need to provide in as great having as great a weight as the men themselves do. And so when we minimize their need to provide, we don't realize we may actually be minimizing them. She also talked about the fact that men want more sex. The assumption is that men love sex, want sex more than women, blah, blah, blah. But the misconception there that she brought out is that men only want sex because of the physical desire, and that it has nothing to do with any emotion. And she said that's actually not true, that their desire for a physical relationship actually is connected to their emotional well-being. And so I want to ask those of you who are watching, what does love look like to you? When do you feel the most loved? Think about that. Whether you're a man or a woman, when do you feel the most loved? Share that with us in the comments, and hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about that today. And I want us to consider whether or not these points that Feldhahn brings out are actually resonating with us. So go ahead and say hello, tell me that you're here, answer that important question about what you need in order to feel loved. And as you think about those questions, I want to just remind you to check out the Hey Girl store. You can go right here on our Facebook page to the images, to the photos that we've uploaded. And there is an album for the Hey Girl store with the listing of all the businesses that we are wanting to support. And particularly during this time of year, it's Christmas, we're doing our holiday shopping. I think it's really important to remember those small businesses, those women-owned businesses, minority businesses that we want to support. The big box stores, Amazon and Walmart, they're all going to be okay. But it's the little guys and the little girls who are trying to make a living in this world that we want to make sure we provide some support to. And this is a good time of year to do that. Also, that's the Hey Girl High Five, of course, and then the Hey Girl store is our own little business that we have with our Hey Girl images. And here's one of my favorite mugs that I use all the time. You can find in the Hey Girl store, and certainly would love if you would support our small business as well. We have some cute things, some great little t-shirts and sweatshirts. And then I mentioned a few weeks ago that my niece Dane, who is an artist, a graphic artist, she created a brand new some graphics for me, and I put it on some brand new products that are so cute. So you definitely want to check those out as well and support my girl Dane. All right, and finally, want to also remind you to sign up for the Hey Girl newsletter, which I send you just a little tidbit in your inbox once a week to encourage you. We have the December calendar for your desktop background that you can grab today. Just click that link to sign up for the newsletter, and let's stay in touch throughout the week because that's what it's all about. We do not want anyone to be or feel alone. We are in this thing together. And a lot of times the experiences that we have that we feel the most desperate about are those that we feel are unique to us. So, hey, Shauna, I see you out there. I'm so glad you have joined us today. I'm so glad you love the mug. And be sure, like I said, to answer the question in the chat. Let me know what it is that you need to feel loved. Shauna, what do you need in order to feel loved? Tell me in the chat, because that's what we're talking about today. And, you know, the assumption is that because we're talking about marriage, it's only married people that can benefit from this conversation. That's absolutely not true. Because as I said, we are always in relationship with people and individuals who are not us. And so sometimes just understanding how others function, how they operate, how they think can benefit us in any relationship that we may find ourselves in. And then if you're single and thinking of getting married at some point, this is also a good show to watch because we have some great information just for you. I am so excited to welcome my guests for today. They actually do marriage ministry for a living, and they minister to singles and married people. Derrick and Sonya McCollum are the founders of Marriage Mentors LLC. They are licensed clinical social workers who specialize in marriage and family counseling, and they've been practicing for 23 years together. They provide in person and online services to families, to individuals, to married people and unmarried people, and not just in the US, but also abroad. The McCullums teach the importance of mental wellness and the connection this has to having healthy relationships. They are also the authors of Unlocking the Mysteries of Marriage, and they have a YouTube channel called Can We Talk? Derrick and Sonya have been married for 26 years and have 4 children: Danielle, Sion, Sai, and little Derrick II. And I am thrilled that they are here today to talk about how to make marriage work. Welcome.
Hey,
Thank
Kim.
you.
Welcome. Thank you for
Thank
having
you
us.
so much.
Hey.
Hi, Kim.
Oh, y'all look so good. Marriage is looking
Thank
good on
you.
you.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you. We're trying. We're trying. We're
Yeah.
fighting.
It's so good to have you. Thank you for being here. And your bio says it all. You've been married for 26 years. You've been doing marriage ministry for 23. So I would say you know a
Mhm.
little bit about marriage, right?
A
Okay,
little
just a
bit.
Little.
little bit. Just, yep.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I would love for you to just share with us how you guys met. How did you get it? How did it all start?
Oh,
Start at the
wow.
beginning.
That's one of our favorite questions. Our story is so funny. You want to share?
Yeah, I love to start first because we got two different sides of the story. I don't know why we
Always.
have two different sides, but
Always.
mine is the truth. Here we go.
Do not
Oh,
dare say that I stalked you.
So, Sonia was working at a school in DC as a licensed clinical social worker. She started her career at a school,
All right.
and I worked at a group home. I went from law enforcement, the military, law enforcement, then I moved to DC, and I started working in a group home. And so the organization that facilitated the group home, they had a school, they had a foster care agency, they had an adoption program. And so we were taking the boys from the group home to school. And so as I used to bring the boys to the school, I saw Sonia. And
No,
when
we met at the retreat.
yes, we met at the retreat. So the school had a retreat, a
Right.
team building exercise. They had the staff comes. And so um, I ran into her and she ran into me. And that's how we met. We met in the woods. We didn't know each other, and she ran into me. She fell on the ground, and I looked at her, and I said, she says, "Are you okay?" And then I said to her, "No, are you okay?" Or something like that. And that's how we met at work.
I love
The
this
part,
story. I've heard it before, and I love the
hmm
two versions. Yeah.
Yeah.
the part that was really interesting was every time they had us pull a number or a color to form groups because it was a team building retreat. Derek and I would pull the same number or the same color. And
It was
then when it was time
definitely.
to go hiking, we had the same hiking gear from the flashlight to the backpack to the jacket. And people thought we knew each other and we had shopped. And I was like, I don't know
Wow.
this man.
Right.
So
It
that was
was
funny.
destiny.
It was
It was
destined.
destiny.
Yes, it was
Yeah.
destined for us to be together. God made that really clear.
Right.
Yes. So, Sonia, you were saying that you had a slightly different version. He said you fell on the floor, fell on the ground, and said,
Well, no, he told it accurately for the first time ever in life because
"Oh,
Well, typically I leave out the part about her stalking me.
I don't know how I could
oh."
have been stalking him.
So
We were
yeah.
at the, I worked there for 4 years, so how am I stalking him if that's his first day on the job?
So
I
you
had
don't know what
no
hit
clue.
you. You in shock. You never seen something like this before.
Oh Lord, you're cutting up already. He's starting already, Kim. I'm sorry.
Okay, so it was destiny. You guys bumped into each other literally,
Yeah.
and
Literally.
and found that you had a connection. So
Absolutely.
happily ever after, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a bumpy start. We got married 2 years after that, and just really weren't we did not prepare for marriage. We prepared our wedding, but we did not. prepare for
Mhm.
marriage. And a lot of times people don't know that there's a difference. So, of
Yeah.
course, when we got married, our expectations created a lot of conflict. And right when we were just kind of going to throw in the towel, we were invited to a retreat by the pastor that did our our pre-marriage counseling, and in that retreat he gave us some tools that we actually started utilizing, and actually we utilize those and teach those now, in addition to
Mhm.
some of the other ones that we learned along the way, to our clients now in our marriage counseling.
Mhm.
So we had to learn how to be married, and we had to be okay knowing that we did not know before that.
Yeah, I think that's very common, right?
It
Especially as
is.
women, we are sort of cultured to plan the beautiful wedding. We have the dream
Yep.
wedding in our
Yep.
minds, and we kind
Yep.
of don't think about marriage beyond that. It's just as long as we
Right.
get them to the altar and and everything looks beautiful and the pictures are
Mhm.
perfect, then everything else will fall into place.
Right.
So can you talk about what those differences and expectations were for you guys and how they manifested after the wedding?
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, we come into the marriage with what we call our core, right? And
Mhm.
we created an acronym for core, which is connecting our relationship experiences. So we teach what
Mhm.
core is in our counseling, but we came in with some relationship experiences that were positive and some that may not have been so positive. And what we
Mhm.
say to people is that marriage is one big trigger party. You get married
Mhm.
and you're just going to trigger each other because there's subconscious and conscious aspects of our makeup, and
Mhm.
the triggers that happen when we're married sometimes have been unconsciously there from experiences that we've had. And
Mhm.
so we have to find a way to connect those relationship experiences to who we're married to and how they're triggering some of those things, so that we had to
Mhm.
start learning that about each other.
Mhm.
So there were things about Derek's core that I triggered, but I didn't know I triggered, because
Mm.
we had two completely very different backgrounds. We had a lot
Right.
of similarities. We're
Mm.
both middle kids, but I grew up in Brooklyn from West Indian parents, and Derek grew up in Philadelphia.
Our backgrounds are completely different,
Yeah.
and I think to answer your question, I had a different perspective of marriage, a different expectation of marriage. I grew up in an abusive home, so my
Mm.
perception of marriage was different. I was married before, so my perception was different. And so even
Mhm.
though we met and the stars were aligned and God said, "This is it, it's ordained,"
Mhm.
first 3 years of our marriage, we had to figure out who we are, who we were, and what we expected in marriage, and we got it all wrong.
Mhm.
We got it all wrong, and
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
that caused a lot of conflict because we were still trying to. We knew that we loved each other. We wanted to be together. We wanted to be married,
Mhm.
but just because we wanted to, our past was like a cloak,
Mhm. Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it collided. And so it
Mhm.
took some time for us to understand what we expected from our marriage.
Mhm.
Mhm. I think you touch on something really important that we don't recognize until we get married, and that is the influence of our own upbringing, of what our parents' relationship looked like, and what
Yeah.
our home life was like as we were growing up. We don't realize how much that impacts how we see
Mhm.
what the expectations, we have of our spouse, or what our sort of worldview is coming into a marriage.
Yes.
I know that that
Mhm.
was that was something that was huge for me as well. Coming from, my husband came
Mhm.
from an intact family, parents have been married forever, never divorced, whereas I had come from a different circumstance, much more dysfunctional. But as a single person, it was just my life. It wasn't weird. It was normal.
Right.
I didn't think anything
Right.
of it. I didn't feel like I had been in any way damaged by it. But once
Right.
I came into this marriage, it was like everything that I had been brought up with suddenly was called into question, or in some way seen, like I held it up against the light of his experience. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, look at all the ways in which my life was terrible, and I am broken, and I am, and it definitely impacted my marriage in ways I had never expected or was
Mhm.
prepared for, as you mentioned.
Mhm.
So, can you give some examples of some of those differences in perspective that you each brought that created that tension?
Well, I was the second daughter in to my parents. I'm the middle, and so my dad used to reference me and my sister as his pearls, and
Mm,
we were treated with so much love and comfort and security that I carried that security over into the marriage. And
mm,
as Derrick is trying to figure out how to be a husband to me, he's also breaching a lot of my security expectations. And
mm,
because temperament plays a part of that, of who we are, my temperament caused him to feel disrespected a lot.
mm,
Um, so, what I say to wives is, we become a lioness depending on your temperament. We become a lioness when our security is compromised or breached.
mhm,
And we
mhm,
don't realize that how we show that up to our spouse, to our husbands, tends to cause them to feel disrespected. So that's kind of the
mhm.
dynamic that kept going on with us until
Right.
we realized and understood that.
Right. And I
Yeah.
came in with a high need of approval.
Hmm.
Even though respect, and she was breaching my respect. But my core, if I had to kind of look at respect versus approval, it's approval.
Hmm.
I think every man
Mm,
approval we need it. We come out the womb with a respect. But I think the deeper core for most men is the need for approval. Uh,
mhm, mhm,
and I think because we were kind of butting heads, and I was
mhm,
kind of yelling in a silent way,
Hmm.
that
mhm,
need, it wasn't heard. So, those, I think that would be one of the main things that were the disconnect for us
Well,
at the time.
and going back to his family of origin, like you asked him, his
mhm,
experience of abuse, the things that I would say would violate some of those
mhm,
experiences that he was
Right.
expecting to have. So I didn't, I didn't I didn't count into the interaction how much
mhm,
the abusive background that he had impacted how I was responding to him.
Right.
mhm, mhm.
Because I didn't
Yeah.
know his feelings. I just knew the story.
Right.
I didn't know his
Yeah.
feelings, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that is so important, Sonia. I want to stay there for a second because how often do we as women not recognize our husband's feelings,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
right? Because they
Right.
manifest differently than ours
Right.
do.
Mm-hmm.
So he
Right.
mentioned he was yelling or he probably got angry, right? And so often
Mhm.
men manifest their emotions with behaviors that we perceive as something other than feeling. It's
Right.
more so,
Mm-hmm.
oh, he's so angry or he's so mad or he's so violent or whatever. And we don't
Mhm.
recognize that it has an
Right.
emotional expression. And
Mhm.
and in my relationship, my husband is very low key. So he doesn't express
Mhm.
what I perceive as any emotion. And so in my
Mhm.
mind, I can say and do whatever and it won't affect him, right? This is early in the marriage, especially. I was like,
Mhm.
oh,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter. I can joke
Mm-hmm.
on
Mhm.
him. I can say whatever. He's not going to respond because he doesn't care. And in actuality, he was feeling it deeply and often
Right.
Mhm.
feeling respected and hurt. And I have no idea.
Mhm.
I didn't
Mm-hmm.
recognize the emotion because it didn't look the
Mhm.
way my emotion looks.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 And so it's
And
it's like trial and error to figure that out, right?
yeah.
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 And it's for men, it's hard to be able to identify our emotions that we're feeling to communicate that. So in all fairness to women, they just don't know. Sonya just didn't know.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until
Mhm.
I was able to share the feeling or the emotion, that's when she kicked into what she's designed to do.
Mhm.
She knew
Right,
my story. She knew the stories, but I never shared that I was hurt. I
right.
felt neglected. I felt lonely. I felt unloved.
Mhm.
Mhm.
All those feeling
Mhm.
words. And so when I finally shared that with Sonia, that's when she went
Mhm.
into, okay, let's do this thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And
She knew how to respond.
we tell a lot of couples that, men may show anger, which most women don't respond well to, but
Yeah.
underneath that anger are actually core emotions that
Mhm.
are more intimate, more vulnerable, and they're actually the primary emotion. And anger is like
Mhm.
the secondary emotion because those primary emotions haven't been identified or spoken out.
Right.
Yes. So
Hmm.
Derek, talk to us about how you as a man came to be able to articulate those emotions because I don't know that many men know how to do that.
It's true. They don't.
They don't. I had to get permission from another man to do it.
Mm.
I mean,
Mm.
because the men that I was around, growing up, my brother's older, and so it's always the old heads, and they're telling me how to be a man at 12 years old and what it
Right.
looks like. And so going through my life as an adolescent and a teenager, even as a young adult, being on the police department and the military, no one, not a man really communicated to me, hey, you got emotions and it is okay to share those emotions and identify it.
Mhm.
So we were 3 years
Mhm.
married before I had a man to say to me, he mentored
Mhm.
me. I spent a lot of time with him through scripture and through understanding God's word on me, what it looks like for me as a man. And then so I really got permission to myself from another man to say, look, it's okay to share your feelings with your wife. It's okay to share your
Yeah.
emotions. So to answer your question, it took another man to tell me it's okay to share your emotions.
Mhm.
Wow. That is so powerful because that is something that men don't typically do. Because the
Mhm.
whole stereotype about being a man is not showing emotion. And so
Absolutely.
how powerful is it that your wife wasn't even able to give you that permission? It needed to come from another
Mhm.
man. And I think that really
Absolutely.
speaks to a need that I don't know that we often recognize, and that is a need for there to be more community among men with other
Mhm.
men to really kind of give one another permission to show emotion, to share emotion,
Mhm.
to validate those emotions, because this society teaches us that men, to be a man is to do just the opposite of that, and what
Right.
that's doing
Right.
is undermining their ability to have relationship then. you
Yeah.
Mhm.
know
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
um
It's true. And it's the
yeah,
thing that plagues most marriages, to be honest. When we
yeah.
get clients, that's the first thing the wife will say on her form is,
Mm,
he doesn't talk, he doesn't open up, he's
yeah,
always angry. I mean, it's just a constant thing, and I think it's unfortunate because men
yes,
have the same feelings, if not deeper, than women do, but they just didn't
yeah.
get permission,
Right.
you know.
And women are able to emote however and whenever they want. We're
Yep,
encouraged to do that.
yep,
So it's
Right.
yep,
truly an
Right.
imbalance there. And
yeah, it's true.
you know, I mentioned at the beginning Shanti Feldhahn's book. That's exactly what she's trying to uncover for us as women. I don't know if
Mm.
you all are familiar with her work.
I
Are
have
you?
heard of her, but I haven't read her book yet.
Yeah. But that's
Mhm.
exactly what she says, is that she
Mhm.
she basically polled several hundred or thousands of men and was shocked by the results of
Mhm.
them basically confessing through anonymous surveys that
Mhm.
to feel respected, to feel loved, they needed to be respected, to feel respect, they needed to their wives to understand the emotion behind some of the things that they
Mhm.
prioritize, including sex, right? And so
Mhm. Mhm.
the most powerful thing about this book has been opening my eyes to what's really going on with my husband, which I would not have known otherwise. And
Mm.
unless
Mhm.
unless we're given that kind of insight, or unless men are able to find ways to articulate it, we will always
Mhm.
be getting it wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And it's interesting because when we have a son, he's the last. So we had to really pay attention to how to encourage him to share his feelings. Yeah, there he is. To share
Oh,
his feelings because he's
yeah,
around a bunch of girls, his sisters and me, and we want to help him not have that disadvantage when he gets married
yeah,
one day. So
yeah,
we talk in feelings. But here's the thing, we had to catch ourselves, Kim, because the same thing that we tell parents of boy children not to do is so tempting to do. So one of the
hmm,
reasons that women are more verbally emotional is because we got permission to share and emote from the time we were little. So if
yeah,
we were crying and adults saw us, they usually would say, "What's wrong?" But if
right,
a boy was crying and they didn't know what was wrong, they would just say, "Stop crying,"
right,
first, right? Stop crying,
yeah,
stop crying, wipe your face. And they would be the same age. They would be 5, 6, and 7, which means that they probably need the same emotional support that a girl
yeah,
does. So early in life, most boys not all boys, but most boys were told not to emote.
Right.
And so
Right.
we have a son, right? Because when we get it, because this is a hard world, especially for black boys and black men, men of color and boys of color.
Yes.
So we're in this rough world. We want them to be strong. So we think
Yes.
telling them to stop crying means to be strong. So when our son would cry, I would catch myself and say, I can't tell him to stop crying. I need to find out what's wrong. But it's so instinctive.
It is.
It's so natural to want to help them not to cry because we
Yeah.
want them to be strong when they go out into this world, that it
Yeah.
happens instinctively. We don't even realize we're doing it. And so we had to
Hmm.
teach him how to say how he feels. So he's great at his feeling words. He'll tell his sisters he's disappointed, he's overwhelmed in a minute, you know. And so but that's because we have to be
Yeah.
intentional about it. It's
Yeah.
really easy to kind of put those boys into that don't
Mhm.
cry category
Yeah.
and then expect them to one day be husbands that share their
Right.
feelings.
Right. Right. Exactly. I just wish we could proclaim this to all the world because if we
Yes,
could get this one thing right, I wonder how much
yes.
of a difference it might make
It would
in
make a
our
lot.
relationships.
Yeah.
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 And and
It's a big deal. That's a big deal.
right. And how do we combine this idea of giving permission for emotional expression with what it means to be a man, right? So,
Hmm.
like, how can we teach our sons to be men and
Hmm.
also still show their
Hmm.
emotion?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Because
Hmm.
if the assumption is that those are in conflict, but
Hmm.
you know
They
what
don't
I
have
mean?
to
So,
be. Right.
yeah,
They don't
right,
have to be.
yeah. I
right.
think I think if the father, the man, the father is secure in himself,
Hmm.
if he knows who he is, I don't think that he'll be less prone to project his inadequacies or his
Hmm.
insecurities or his emotional deficiencies
Hmm.
into the relationship. I think he
Hmm.
has to be sure of who he is and then understand that there is a mix. Yeah, I want my son to fall down and bust his knee wide open and look at it and wipe up the blood and then I have to say, well, how do you feel, son?
Hmm.
It hurts.
Hmm.
Okay,
Mm.
it
Yeah.
hurts. Okay, son, it's going to hurt.
Hmm.
It's
Mm.
going to hurt,
Hmm.
but it's
Hmm.
okay. Now let's clean it up and go
Yeah.
back out and get on your bike.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
think part of it is for the man to understand his own where he is as a father, because
Hmm.
some of that is projected on
That's true.
to his son, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah. Right. Right. So obviously we can't, as women, as wives, we can't control the experiences that our husbands have had being taught to be men. And so, Sonia, you mentioned that instead, I guess it's our job then to, as best we can, recognize the signs of those emotions, even if they look different than what we would expect, and then respond appropriately. So, as you
Hmm.
begin to understand that his behavior was an expression of hurt or disappointment or whatever the emotion was, what then did you do in response, and what do we as wives need to do in response in order to really protect his ego and
Hmm.
also respond appropriately to the emotion he's expressing in our when we're in relationship.
Well, one of the other intimacy needs that I discovered a lot of men have, in addition to approval and respect, is acceptance.
Mm,
And I made a point and I made a commitment to Derek to never reject what he had to say or how he felt,
mm,
because rejection was a big theme in his life. And when he shared those experiences with me, I knew that he was taking a chance and he was being vulnerable. So I told him that I would never reject him. And I mean, to this day, I don't say no
mm,
to anything. And people think that that's crazy, but there are other ways to maybe not meet that need at that time other than saying no. So it
mm,
would be, maybe can we talk about it? How about later?
mhm,
Let's come up with a plan, but I just don't say no. And that was a
mm,
commitment I made to him, sexually, emotionally, financially, in
mm,
any form. I don't say no. And I've made that a
Hmm.
commitment. And a lot of wives think that that's crazy, but it's so profound because if he knows that he's going to come to me with something vulnerable, he knows that it's safe and he's not going to be rejected because before I understood his story, that's all I used to do. No, well, not all I used to do, but I used to do it a lot.
It was
Yeah.
all. I think you said it well.
It was
It
all.
was all you did.
I didn't always, but a lot of the times I did in some way reject what he had to say. You know, I'm a debater.
Mm,
I was my high school debate captain. I love a good debate. I'm a choleric
mm,
temperament. Cholerics can debate all day long. I didn't realize that
mm,
that was rejection for Derek. So if he gave me a
mm,
thought and I wanted to debate it, he saw that as
mm.
rejection.
Ah. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I had to say, can I give another perspective?
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Right?
So
Because
that,
hmm,
yeah, that's interesting because last week I mentioned something else that she mentioned in her book, was that the way that we talk to our husbands, I think we often, like I said before, we assume they can take it, so we just kind of say it however we want to say it. But if they were to say that or speak that way to us, we would be hurt and
mhm,
offended, and and
mhm,
so it's almost like do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
mhm,
So thinking about
mhm.
how this might make him feel,
Right,
as you would hope he would do for you,
right,
may really be a good rule of thumb, because I can speak from my experience. I would talk to him however, because I didn't think it hurt him. I felt like he had a
right,
force field
right.
around him, and so it would just bounce off.
Mhm.
And yet if he would speak that way to me, I'd be a puddle of tears. So
Right.
it was really a matter
Yeah,
of being considerate of how he might feel, even though he didn't, show those feelings the same way. I had to
right.
recognize that he still needed me to be careful with my words.
Yes, absolutely. And I
Mhm.
think because we start off with our husbands not really being emotionally expressive, we don't think
Mhm.
that they have those emotions, so we aren't careful with our words,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So with the couples that you all have been working with over the years, what are some of the common issues that they are dealing with, and how do you help them with those?
Oh man, communication. Every form that they come into
Mhm,
says communication.
mhm,
And it's such a
Mm.
broad issue, right? So when
Mhm.
we scale it down, with each couple, it looks different, but communication is the issue that causes them to be in conflict.
mhm,
Because
Mm.
there is a language for marriage, and a lot of people don't know it. So most of our counseling sessions is about teaching the marriage language.
Mm.
And
Okay.
because communication is such a broad issue, when we say we're going to teach you a marriage language, it tunes their ear to understanding why they've been in conflict, um, historically in their relationship before coming to us. So we start off with understanding what what their needs are. We have an intimacy needs inventory because conflict exists when there's a need of another and that need is not being met. We talk about our
Mm.
temperaments because our temperaments have a lot to do with whether we're going to internalize first or externalize
Mhm.
first. And so when a husband and
Mhm.
wife know all of these different dynamics to themselves and to their spouse, they're starting to become more awake to the marriage language,
mhm,
right?
Mm.
So,
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
example, I used to be so bothered that I would share a whole lot of stuff with Derek, and I would feel like he was tuning me out because I'm expressive, I'm external expressor. Um,
Uh-huh.
what I didn't realize was that he was internally processing it
Oh man. Yep.
based on his temperament, right? And so
Mhm.
here's the needs part. So when he would say that, he would say to me, he needs time to process. He would just say,
Mhm.
I need whatever it is he needs. And then the question is whether I'll be able to meet that need or not, because that's what
Mm.
conflict is, where there's a need of another and that need is not being met or
Mm.
recognized.
Mhm.
So, y'all found some old pictures.
That's y'all
Okay,
doing your
okay.
thing.
Okay. So that's funny. I just saw I'm like, wow, way back. That's our retreat we did here in Atlanta. So we had to start helping couples ground floor, honestly,
Yeah.
from the ground
Mhm.
floor, know what their temperaments
Mhm.
are and
Yeah.
understanding their needs. Those
That's
are
so
the
good.
ground floor.
I love the idea of there being a marriage language. So it's a
Yeah.
very peculiar. I guess it's not peculiar, but it's specific to the marriage
Yes.
relationship. And it's like, oh,
Right.
if
Hmm.
we're gonna do marriage, this is the language. These are the tools for the
Right.
language that we need in order to make this
Yes.
marriage work.
Right.
That's
Yes.
powerful. Yeah,
Yeah.
very,
Yeah.
very, very, very good. So, talk a little bit about what you guys are doing. You mentioned that you did a retreat or you do retreats. Talk about some of the other things that you guys
Whew.
do as the marriage menders.
We have a YouTube channel. We decided our children, it was about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, do a YouTube because we know we're kind of in the stone age and like, what are you talking about? YouTube channel, vlogging. What is
Yeah.
Yeah.
vlogging? And so a few
Yeah.
years ago, do a vlog and get a ring light and just shoot it from your phone. And so that's one of the things that we've been doing is actually taking what our life sometimes is our
Hmm.
transparency, who we are, but we inject clinical skills, we inject things that will help couples and sometimes in some cases it's singles understand us and what we're saying from the use of YouTube vlogs. So
Yeah.
that's one of the things that we do.
Nice.
And it really reinforces what we are learning
Right.
about ourselves. So we
Mhm.
might have
Mhm.
a aha moment about ourselves, and we'll make it a vlog episode.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so we
Nice.
enjoy doing that. Yeah, we need to
Yeah.
actually pick back up on it. COVID kept us real busy
Yeah.
with our private practice part of our ministry, and it's
Mhm.
been really, really difficult time wise.
Yes.
The need is so
Yeah.
high, like we barely have time to do anything
Right.
these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
So
we
how can people
I'm sorry, go
find
ahead.
you if they need your services?
Well, they find us a lot. We're getting a lot of word of mouth, and
Mhm.
because we do the other thing we do in answer to your question is we do a lot of retreats for churches. And so
Okay.
like we were in Wisconsin earlier in November and we have a few coming up. So a lot of the times the attendees of those retreats will find out that we do counseling and then they'll,
Mm.
sign up for counseling. Our website is another way to
Mhm.
find us marriagemenders.org. And then we also spend some of our weekends going to the homes of clients who are having marital problems that just the traditional counseling sessions won't really satisfy. So we were
Yeah.
just in North Carolina last week, and we go into homes over the weekends, some weekends, to help couples just do a hands-on for 3 days. We call those the in-home intensive marriage
Yeah.
counseling weekends.
So can you talk a little bit about that? What
Mhm.
is involved in an in-home intensive?
Well, we go into their homes so that they feel safe because we also
Mhm.
recognize that some people have an aversion to coming into the office or even being on Zoom or virtual. And so being at home, even for husbands especially, they kind of like the idea that they still have the
Right.
control because they're in
Mhm.
their setting and in
Mhm.
their environment, and it makes it a lot more relaxing for them. So the in-home has a therapeutic effect that the other locations don't. So
Mhm.
we usually start off understanding, hearing their stories and hearing their individual family life experiences, because again, we're searching for their core to find out what
Mhm.
their relationship experiences are that might be contributing to some of the problems in the marriage. And then we talk about what their outcome is and what they want to see for the weekend.
Mhm.
And then throughout the weekend, we do some hands on exercises to bring out some
Mhm.
lessons that they ordinarily wouldn't get just from us talking.
Right. And it allows our gender to play a big role in our therapeutic process
Mhm.
because most men, even though it's a safe place for us to come to, they still may
Mhm.
be resistant to the process. And so it allows me to be more involved in making them feel comfortable,
Mhm.
making them feel safe. And that's when I pose the question, how did you feel? How did you feel? How did you feel?
Mhm.
And I say, it's okay
Mhm.
to share your feelings. It's okay to, and the wife is like silently, yes, yes, share your feelings, man.
Yeah.
Go ahead. And it's a powerful
Yeah.
experience
It
when he
is.
feels safe enough to say, I feel alone. I feel
Yeah.
loved. And then when he says that, it's a powerful experience when the wife sees that oh, he has feelings. And
Mhm.
then
Yeah.
we help them massage that part of their relationship. So it's a
Wow. I
powerful
can
experience when
imagine.
we do that.
It
Yeah,
really is powerful
Yeah.
to see the man identify his feelings
it is.
and get the freedom that comes from finding it.
Yeah,
There's an initial aversion to that process, and once
Yeah.
Derek kind of cheerleads him,
because their
yeah,
stories are so, we've been
yeah,
blessed to sit in front of people who their stories are so just incredible from trauma.
Yeah.
yeah,
And especially for men, just to hear their story, it makes sense why they have an aversion to sharing their feelings.
yeah,
You
Yeah.
know, and so we help massage that part of it. Well, that's the benefit from having the intensive.
yeah. We get to spend more
Yeah.
time building the
Yeah.
relationship face to face, and it really does make a
Hmm.
big difference.
Yeah. So I feel like
Hmm.
we keep coming back to that same point then about
Hmm.
um, men's need to for their emotions to be recognized, but of course also the
Hmm.
inability they have often to express that. But also
Hmm.
then when we do understand as their wives, once we do understand, like that just seems to be the key that unlocks the door to
Yep.
everything else in the
Yep.
relationship.
It does, because Kim, if you could
It
see
does.
the wife when the husband says his feelings, because here's one of the things that we do teach. Most women respond poorly to the negative behaviors that are coming from the emotions of their husbands. We are
Hmm.
made to respond to their feelings. So a husband could
Hmm.
have violated her 100 times, but when he shares his feelings, something ignites inside of her, and all of a sudden
Mm.
she's there to help. Like, it never ceases to amaze us. Like, she just
Wow.
becomes this helper after he
Yeah.
shares his feelings.
Right.
The behavior would have turned her off. The things he would have done in the past would have turned her off. But when he says how he feels, it's almost like it cancels out all the bad behavior that those feelings were causing him to have.
Hmm.
And we wait
Wow.
for it. Like, we're really excited about it because we know the wife was
Yeah.
made to kick in and to help. And we just wait, and we were like, there she go. There she
Well, Sonya actually did it with me when I shared my feelings. Uh, the first 3 years of my marriage.
go. Oh yeah. I remember
When I
that.
Yeah.
share her about my story and abuse and I share how I felt, you know what she says? She says, "Man, I wish I was there when you were 12 years old. I
Mhm.
would have
Oh.
protected you." That was deep. And I'm like, "You would have protected me at 12?" I went back to being 12 and I laid my
Oh.
head on her chest and she hugged me and but that's the power of
Oh.
it. That
And
was the
that's
power
why
of it.
we
Yeah.
encourage the husbands to tell their stories and the
Yeah.
feelings with their stories, because we were given the hormone of empathy and bonding. We have more of it.
Yeah.
The love hormone of oxytocin is in the woman more than it is in the man. So the minute that our husbands tell us their stories and their feelings, we are inclined to empathize immediately.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And it's
That's
usually
so
the poor
powerful.
coping mechanisms of the husband that brings them to counseling, because the poor coping mechanisms compromise the security of the wife.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whether it's
Yeah.
infidelity, whether it's pornography, whether it's drinking or drug, whatever they're coping with compromises the security. But they're coping because they haven't found their feelings.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So what's also powerful about that, and I said this last week, it's in her book as well, and I know that you all we want to talk about your book too, but I think if we as women can understand the power that we have,
Hmm.
cool, it could destroy him or it could
Hmm.
completely reform him and build him
Yep.
up and make
Absolutely.
him the
Yes.
man that you want him to be, that God wants him to be. Like we
Amen.
Yes.
literally have that power. And
Yes.
it's a little scary to think that we could literally destroy him, but we can. And so
Yes.
if we take that same power and use it to make him better and make him all that he can be, I mean,
Hmm.
oh, if we could just get with wives, when we could just understand that, that
Yes.
power and use
Yes.
it for good. Oh man,
I mean, and
man,
that's what turned our marriage around, actually, Kim. It was that
yeah,
probably about year 5 or 6, we were still trying to figure this thing out. And I remember God and I had an encounter, and he said, you have so much power. you don't even realize how much power you have. I tell wives all the time, even today, I know that I could say the right thing, which would be the wrong thing tonight, and throw him off. I know I have that kind of
Yeah.
power. And
Right.
so God held me up one day and he said, "You're going to use your power for good and not
Yeah.
evil, because you have
Yeah.
not been using it for good, my daughter." And so I went into a
Yeah.
season of prayer and supplication and submission. And I went
Mm-hmm.
into a year, 365 days of really asking God to show me every day how to transform my power for good. Because
Yeah.
I knew that, and that's what we tell wives all the time. When you're in a verbal match with your husband, they may come and slice your arm with a knife. We bring a gun and it's a bullet to the head, and there it's
Mm-hmm.
fatal when we're done, because we
Right.
we kind of take the hit, but then when we throw that bullet, they're
Right.
done, and
Oh,
we know they're done, and we
yeah.
know that we have that kind of power. So I tell the wives all the time, use your powers for good. If you want
Yeah.
the husband to be the provider, the protector, the positioner, all those wonderful things, use your powers for good,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you will see
I
a different
mean,
man.
yeah. And it will only benefit us in the long run, right? Like use it for
Exactly.
good and we all get blessed.
Exactly. Yes.
Hmm.
So I want to throw up your book also. Talk about your book and how we can
Oh,
find it and what you bring out in the book in particular.
so we're actually on our second book. It should have been published, but we just got so overwhelmed. So, but this is our first book. This was about our first 16 years of marriage, and
Uh-huh.
every chapter has a story about something we learned about ourselves in our marriage, and then we have some scriptural antidotes at the end that have to
Mm-hmm.
do with unlocking the secrets that God has put inside of us in our marriage relationships. And so the scriptures help us unlock those mysteries. But it's a
Mm.
very transparent book, very transparent. And
Yeah.
it's really, we give the good, the bad, and the ugly in the book. And
Mm-hmm.
it can be found on Amazon or on our website. It's on Kindle right now on Amazon. We have to get them to read to the hard copy, but the hard
Okay.
copies are accessible on our website, which is marriagemenders.org. And if you want to just get it really quick on Kindle, you can go on Amazon because it's been on there for a while.
It is a really good book, guys. I definitely encourage you to pick it up. What I love about Derrick and Sonya is that they are not afraid to be transparent. They tell their story, they give it to you raw and it's
Mm-hmm.
real. And I think that that's so important because I think the assumption a lot of times is that when people, marriage experts get up and talk, they have the perfect little
Mm-hmm.
story and the perfect little
Mm-hmm.
narrative. And then all you got to do is follow these 5 steps to a perfect marriage. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, yeah, it doesn't feel real to those of us who are in the trenches. We're
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, good
Right.
for
Hmm.
you. But
Mm-hmm.
and so I think that that's really what is powerful about your ministry is that it is very real, very raw, and very relevant. And I think
Thank
that
you.
everyone who is walking this marriage journey needs that kind of resource in order to know how to do this thing well. And we've kind of touched on some of those things today, but there's so much more definitely to talk about. And I can't wait for the new book to come out. So you will have to
Thank
come
you.
back when the new book is
Yes,
Yes.
out so we can talk about that.
Yes,
we
we
will.
will. We will. We definitely would love to come back on. Just pray for us that we can get it finished before the year is out. We're working on that.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. We will put God on that and speak
Yes.
it into existence. And this time
Amen.
Yes.
next year, we'll be back on to talk about
Awesome.
it.
Amen.
Awesome. Sounds like a
Well,
plan. Thank you so much for having us, Kim.
fantastic. Thank you so much to both of you. I love you both and wish you
Love you
continued
Love you
too.
happiness
too.
in your
Love
marriage
you
and with your
too. Thank you
family.
so much. And all the best to you and yours as well. Give Everett our hugs and love and the girls.
I will. Thank you so much. And
You're
thank
You're
all of
welcome.
welcome.
you for being here today. We appreciate you stopping by for this very important conversation that we will be having throughout the month of December, as you know, and the information to reach the marriage menders if you're interested in their counseling services or if you want to grab that book. They are all in the comments, so be sure to check those things out. I want to mention last week's scripture before I do this week's scripture, because I feel like there's a connection here. We talked last week about the importance of loving one another. And today that's really at the heart of what we were talking about. Ephesians 5:33 was our scripture last week, and it said, each man must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. And we recognize that what we're really talking about is love. Even though it for man is respect, for woman it's love, it's really all love. And we must do that one for the other, which ties into the scripture for today, which comes from Matthew 22:35. And it says that, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment, and a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. We often read that scripture and think about our love for our neighbor being some person that lives on our street or that we see in church or that we work with. But really, this also is relevant to the marriage relationship, because again, it's about love. Notice that love for the other person in the same way that we love ourselves, right? So first of all, we have to love ourselves, and we may need to talk about or work on doing that. But then when we love others as we love ourselves, we can fulfill God's commandment for one, but we can also have successful relationships. And this verse in particular, though, adds the element that is most important of all, and that is to love God first. Because it is only when we love God and allow his love to flow through us that we actually can love one another, that we actually can love ourselves. So I love the ministry that the McCollums have, because they also talk about the individual mental health and mental well-being that must come first in order for us to be in relationship to one another. And as I said before, it all comes down to love. So I hope that you will continue to join us each week for this very important conversation, and that I hope that you will think about how these points that we have been discussing are relevant to you in your own life. And just know, as we began the show today, I talked about the fact that you're not alone. We're in this together. We're all walking this road together. And so let's lift one another up as best we can. All right. So I'll see you next week. We will have our special guests, John and April, who are going to help us continue this conversation. And please be sure to share the live and share the replay with those that you love, so that we can be prepared to get into it again next week. Until next time, I'll see you later. God bless.
Hey girl, you don't want to miss Saturdays this month as we discover the secrets to a happy marriage. Meet the marriage mentors, Derrick and Sonya McCollum, the love experts, John and April Nixon, and settle in for a cozy Christmas conversation with Everett and Kim. It's the Hey Girl Marriage Edition, Saturdays at 5 on Facebook Live.